by the Obama White House. Where does this fight go? Let's discuss. We have Phil Mudd, CNN counterterrorism analyst and former CIA counterterrorism official, and Tom Fuentes, CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former FBI assistant director. Now, the last time we saw this kind of dust-up between Trump and the intel community, not long after that, the dossier came out from leaked sources there. So obviously nobody wants to see this game being played. Doesn't help anybody. Let me give you two pieces of sound and get your reactions to them in terms of what the state of play is. Here is Michael Hayden and what he said about this, obviously former intel chief.
My first instinct is I want to get angry, all right? And I try to discipline myself not to do that. And I focus on this as a great sadness. This is a community that exists to serve the President of the United States. And he's done things over the past more than 45 days, even as President-elect, that seems to put him at odds with an intelligence community, again, that exists only to serve him.
Now, Philip, you've said in the past, so what? These people are professionals. These men and women will do their job. But like I said, you had the dossier come out. You have these rumblings of umbrage. You have this apparent disconnect. What do you make of the state of play?
I think we're missing one question here. We talk about this state of play and what Jim Comey does, what the Attorney General does. There's one question we haven't answered in the past 48 hours that I think is interesting, particularly in light of what Sean Spicer's talking about in terms of the president wanting to protect the United States. I watched both President Bush and President Obama meet regularly with the Attorney General and the FBI Director at least once a week, because those meetings typically are focused on conversations about terrorism investigations in the United States, so the president knows the most significant investigations and can ask a simple question: what can I do to help? If the president wants to know what happened at the FBI and DOJ, we're talking about this public posturing. Is he ever meeting with the Attorney General and the FBI Director, if he's so interested in our security, to discuss ongoing investigations against terrorists? That's a yes or no question for Mr. Spicer. If he isn't, I want to know why he's so different than Bush Obama. If he is, doesn't he ask them the question about what's happening with this? This is the matador-in-chief, the President of the United States, who's throwing a red cape in front of the American people. That is this ridiculous claim that Trump Tower was wiretapped because he doesn't want Russia talked about. Well, that's what's going on, Chris. It's not much more complicated than that.
Philip Mudd says it's a ridiculous claim, but we just had John Kelly, General, Secretary of Homeland Security, Tom, say, I'm sure if the president says this, he's got convincing evidence.
That's exactly, Chris, what you would expect members of his cabinet to say. He must know something we don't know. He must have some evidence, or he wouldn't make the statement, because if there's no evidence and it didn't occur, as Phil said, it's outrageous.
But it also doesn't make any sense, because to Philip's point, and he actually has one this time, is you could pick up the phone as President of the United States. I mean, Tom, you were at the FBI forever, and say, was there a FISA warrant out on me? Was it on my organization? What's going on here? Couldn't that phone call take place, Tom?
It could. And, you know, and we can argue that all these calls should have been made, or Saturday morning, right, when he decided that he believed this to have occurred, could have called a meeting, right, of his top security people and gone into this, right, rather than a public tweet, right, before any other evidence is offered. So we just don't know all of that. And we're trying to get into his head and figure out, well, why didn't he call this person? Why didn't he declassify the information? You know, why he didn't do it differently. I don't know we'll ever have an answer to why he didn't do it differently.
Well, the political speculation is, Phil, that he's doing this because he wants us to be talking about it. And that's fine. Then he's getting what he wants. But our whole lens of analysis on this on New Day has been, this is crushing his credibility, because this isn't like his other wacky theories about who was celebrating after 9/11 and 5 million people voting illegally, because he couldn't prove those. This he could prove and hasn't. And it is engendering a distrust among his intel people, as evidenced by what happened with the FBI over the weekend. And then we had Sean Spicer say this yesterday.
What's the president's view of James Comey right now? Does he have the president's full faith and confidence to stay on as the FBI director?
Well, I don't think we've only heard unsubstantiated anonymous sources make those claims. I don't think Director Comey has actually commented on anything that he has allegedly said. So I'm not going to comment on what people say he might have said. I think the director is more than capable of speaking for himself.
But what about the president's view of the FBI director?
Well, I even asked him that yet. I think obviously he's focused today first and foremost on this effort to keep the country safe.
Sarah Murray asking the questions there. Very interesting where Sean Spicer's head was. She didn't ask what he thought of what Jim Comey had said, but that's where Spicer's head went. That's what they're obviously concerned about. Do you think Jim Comey can stay on in this environment where there's obviously distrust and a softball being offered there to validate his existence was not swung at by the White House?
I think he can, but I think it's getting increasingly questionable. Let's look at this game from two lenses, Chris. Number one, Jim Comey's asking his boss, that is the new Attorney General, to come out and make a statement. Comey doesn't, especially after the Hillary Clinton email scandal, that controversy. He doesn't want to come out and comment on an investigation himself. He does want his boss, who was appointed by the president, nominated by the president, obviously Comey wasn't, to take the heat on this one. So I think the politics of this, where Comey wants his boss out in front, are fascinating. Weeks in, the new Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, has got to figure out, do I say something or not? More broadly, let me close on this. In the past few weeks, the president repeatedly has forced his senior officials, whether it's conversations with NATO, conversations at the UN about Russia, and now with the Attorney General and the FBI, conversations about this absurd claim of wiretapping. He's repeatedly gotten sideways with senior officials where they are out in public saying things that are 180 degrees different from what the president says. I've never seen anything like this in my life, Chris. It's crazy.
Tom, Phil, thank you very much. And obviously, we're talking about this in the context of what happens when the president's credibility matters, when he needs the intel community to back him up and give the American people faith in something that will affect all of us and our safety. We'll see. Gentlemen, appreciate it. Allison.
Thank you.
All right, as you've been talking about, Chris, Mr. Trump's top aides are publicly defending the president's latest accusations, even though they say they've not seen any evidence. So we're going to take a closer look at what they're saying and how they're saying it. The president's wiretapping claims, what are they based on? Well, when pressed for evidence, Mr. Trump's aides do not present any.
I haven't had the chance to have the conversation directly with the president, and he's at a much higher classification than I am, so he may have access to documents that I don't know about. Look, the president firmly believes that the Obama administration may have tapped into the phones at Trump Tower.
And he has said what he said. You saw his tweets very clearly. And then further clarification of that he wants an investigation. He wants this to be investigated so we can get to the bottom of it.
All right, here to discuss this style is CNN senior media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources, Brian Stelter, and CNN media analyst Bill Carter. Gentlemen, great to have you here. Brian, in previous administrations, as far back as the mind can go, when you are the president's spokesperson and you're speaking for the president, you've done your homework and you know what the president is talking about and you know what he's basing his accusations on. That's not this White House style. They go out and say, I don't know, the president believes it. For whatever reason.
I'll try not to dodge your questions the way sometimes we see Conway and Sanders and others dodging questions in these interviews. I do think that's the way we would like it. We would like when a spokesperson is speaking for President Trump or any other president to have actually spoken with the president themselves and know where the president's mind is at. In this case, you're right, we're not getting that. This decreases the value of these interviews with White House spokespeople and surrogates. If they don't know what the president's thinking, if they don't know the president's sourcing, it's actually less interesting to hear from these people. However, it does create...
If you can't get information, then what's the point?
Right.
It's theater.
I do think it creates opportunities for the anchors to show the White House is being insular and is not providing those answers. So the theater aspect is actually useful, but the value of access becomes diminished when the people who are speaking for the president can't really speak for the president.
Well, it can't be expected, Bill, to be able to answer your questions about what they're saying to him when they're too busy scurrying around trying to find something that would qualify as proof to back up what he said. But here's where they caught on this one. And Brian got caught up with this, being battled and targeted by the right. Yes. The president's given a big gift to these fringe elements on the political right. And good for them. They're getting their chance to speak up. They've gotten their moment in the sun. Enjoy it. But He knows the answer to the questions that he is asking. He's the President of the United States. If he wants to know if there was a FISA warrant, he doesn't have to listen to a radio show.
Correct.
He can pick up the phone.
But you don't know that he hasn't done that.
We don't know that he hasn't done it, and we don't know that he has done it. He seems to act so impulsively.
We do know that if he has done it, he has not gotten told what he wanted to be told. Otherwise, he would be. It doesn't make any sense for him to not reveal it.
He has a Twitter feed to make those announcements.
He made the Twitter feed to make the charges. He could use the Twitter feed to explain them. He doesn't do that. And then he kind of leaves these people sort of out to dry. He doesn't really care that they don't know what they're doing and what they're talking about. He pushes them out there, and then when they don't do it effectively, he blames them. They're sort of in a terrible position.
And then people apologize for them and say, you know, I feel bad for him. I feel bad for her. Why? They're not conscripted.
No,
They had a choice. This is a high-profile thing they'll have on their pedigrees for the rest of their lives, and each one of us makes a choice every day about how you do your job. I don't feel sorry for anybody.
You're being tough today, Chris. I'm a little bit sympathetic to the Sanders and the Conways.
Why?
Well, that they don't have answers to questions, and they're being told to get out there and represent this White House. They like to talk about, I suppose, what executive orders the president's signing. We are more interested, for understandable reasons, in evidence for his claims on Twitter.
If they had to take a pledge, and many don't because they're political appointees, but even then, what was supposedly the conscientious decision to take the job? Was it to do only what the president likes and make him happy at all times so I can get a high-paying job after this and stay a friend of the administration?
That is
or was it to serve
what
people?
A spokesperson generally does. A spokesperson isn't usually working for the United States. He's usually working for the president and does serve at his bidding, but he usually has a path and an understanding to what's going on. These people don't have that path, clearly, and they've hurt their credibility already. Kellyanne Conway.
Service.
Well,
Kellyanne could have made a ton of money staying on the outside. She went inside because she said she believed in doing what's right for the American people.
Well,
that is a crucial reminder. They're paid by the taxpayers.
Agenda. I mean, and so I think that they think that they'll get to the president's agenda somehow through all of this. Well, one thing that we want to point out right now, these photographs have just been released by the National Park Service.
Right.
You remember the dispute about the inaugural crowds.
Right.
President Trump claimed that his were the biggest. In fact, these are the official dozens of photographs from the National Park Service that was not going to release these, by the way, had it not been for a Freedom of Information Act request by various media outlets. So they have complied and released these photographs now, and you do see large open spaces. You could say, you could chalk this up to who cares?
Right.
Or you could chalk this up to we want the president to tell the truth, and when he doesn't, it's the press's job to have to do that.
Just underscore again that many, many things this president says they are not backed up then by evidence. So we now have a case where he's made another charge and he has not got evidence. Why are we surprised? This is what he's done repeatedly.
I'm surprised because he's the president of the United States and he could get the answer to this question. It's not 9/11 celebrations. It's not birtherism.
It clearly doesn't have the answer. It doesn't fit his agenda, his narrative. So he's not giving the answer.
I think the narrative was to distract and have us talking about President Obama and all of these things being added to the investigations. We haven't said the name Jeff Sessions once this week on this show in the context of the questions about him or the Russian allegations. And the only high ground they have there, which is good high ground that they don't use enough, is, hey, you keep saying there are all these questions. Nobody has tied anybody in the Trump administration to collusion efforts with Russia. So when is there going to be some there on that? Fair point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, should be hearings on it. That's obviously what should happen.
Got it. Gentlemen, thank you. Brian, Bill, thank you very much. Thanks to our international viewers. For you, CNN Newsroom is next. For our U.S. viewers, New Day continues right now.
This is the moment Republicans have promised would come.
When we repeal and replace Obamacare, it will amount to the biggest entitlement reform in at least the last 20 years.
The biggest concern I have, will it lower health care costs and premiums?
I am confident we are going to pass this.
This executive order responsibly provides a needed pause.
It's not a Muslim ban. There will probably be other countries we will look at.
The president firmly